The fitness center had always been a second home to Jenna. For 3 years, she had been a personal trainer there, carving out a routine, building relationships with regular clients, and enjoying the hum of early mornings when the gym was just opening. It was a large facility spread over 2 floors, with heavy machinery on the ground level and a smaller, more intimate space upstairs for yoga and stretching classes. On the weekends, the place thinned out dramatically, and during the late night hours, it was nearly deserted, except for a skeleton crew of staff and a few insomniacs who swore by their midnight workouts. Jenna loved her job, but that love began to warp one chilly autumn night. It was a Sunday near midnight, and she had stayed late to prepare for a Monday morning client. She was alone in the upstairs yoga studio, tidying mats and cleaning mirrors, when she felt it, the sudden, heavy drop in temperature. The overhead fluorescent lights flickered once, twice, then steadied. She paused, brushing it off as a quirk of the aging building's electrical system. She returned to her task, but the air grew colder still, and the silence around her deepened until it felt suffocating. A faint, almost imperceptible sound drifted from the main floor below, like the low rumble of weights being dropped, but there should have been no one else in the gym at that hour. Jenna froze and strained her ears. The sound stopped. She sent a quick text to the front desk staff downstairs, asking if anyone was still on site. No reply. She decided to finish up quickly and head home. As she gathered the last of the yoga mats, she noticed the large mirror at the far end of the room was fogged over, even though there was no heat or moisture in the room to cause it. The reflection rippled strangely, as if disturbed by a breeze, but the windows were all shut tight. Goosebumps crept over her arms. She turned away and reached for the door, but it wouldn't budge. Jenna pushed harder, heart pounding. The doorknob felt icy cold, and just as she tried to twist it again, a whisper brushed her ear, so soft she almost missed it. Stay. She spun around, heart in her throat. The room was empty. The lights flickered again, and for a split second in the mirror's reflection, she saw a figure, an indistinct woman, pale and thin, standing behind her. When she looked directly, the figure vanished. The grip of fear tightened. Jenna's phone buzzed in her pocket, a message from the front desk. Emergency. Lockdown initiated. Don't leave your area. Her stomach dropped. She called the front desk, but the line was dead. Jenna's thoughts raced. The gym had been quiet all evening. No alarms or incidents reported. What was going on? Suddenly, the overhead speaker crackled to life, and a voice echoed faintly through the air, distorted and crackling like a broken radio transmission. Help! Trapped! Jenna's skin prickled. The voice was female, desperate, almost pleading. Gathering courage, she tried the door again. It clicked and swung open, but the hallway beyond was pitch black. The emergency lights, usually bright and reliable, flickered dimly, casting long shadows. Jenna stepped out cautiously. The silence of the gym was heavy. The rows of treadmills and ellipticals stood like dormant beasts, their digital displays blank. She moved toward the stairwell that led to the main floor, but halfway there the voice returned, clearer this time. Find me. A chill ran down her spine. She reached the stairwell and descended carefully, the echo of her footsteps loud in the darkened gym. As she reached the bottom, she noticed the main entrance doors were locked tight, with emergency shutters pulled down. No way out. Her phone flashlight illuminated the room as she scanned. The equipment was covered in dust. Too much dust. It hadn't been cleaned or used in weeks. Confused, Jenna moved toward the front desk where the security cameras were monitored. The screens flickered erratically, some showing static, others a shadowy figure moving between machines. It was the same pale woman from the mirror, pacing silently. The cameras went dead. Jenna's heart pounded as a sudden noise erupted nearby, metal clanging like weights crashing to the floor. She ran toward the sound, finding the free weights area empty except for a single old-fashioned dumbbell lying on its side. No one was around. Then, from the corner of the gym, she saw it, a faint glow, almost like candlelight, hovering near the back wall where the old therapy room used to be before renovations years ago. Jenna approached slowly, the glow coalescing into the shape of a woman dressed in a vintage tracksuit, her face etched with sadness. The apparition spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I was betrayed. I was trapped here. Jenna felt tears prick her eyes as she listened. The woman was the ghost of Lisa Moore, a trainer who had worked in the gym's early days, years before the renovations. Lisa had been dedicated to her clients and passionate about fitness, but had suffered an accident during a late-night session that led to her untimely death in the very room Jenna stood in. Rumors had swirled about negligence, about management ignoring safety protocols, but no one had ever spoken openly. Lisa's spirit was trapped, restless and hurt. Jenna promised to help her find peace. The next days were a blur of research, speaking with longtime employees, and digging through old files. She uncovered evidence that the gym's owners had covered up the circumstances of Lisa's accident to avoid liability. Armed with the truth, Jenna confronted the management and pushed for the story to be made public. Soon after, the gym held a memorial service in Lisa's honor, placing a plaque near the area where she had died. From that night on, the strange occurrences ceased. The cold spots vanished, the whispers stopped, and the gym's atmosphere felt lighter. Jenna knew Lisa was finally free, but sometimes, when the gym is empty and the night is still, a faint whisper drifts on the air, a soft thank you from a grateful spirit, finally at peace. Story the end. Night cleaner at Vanguard Fitness. A popular gym nestled on the outskirts of a mid-sized city. The gym was housed in an old converted warehouse, its high ceilings and concrete floors giving it an industrial vibe. Most of the equipment was new, but the building itself carried the weight of years past. They told me I'd mostly be cleaning the place after closing, mopping floors, wiping down machines, sanitizing locker rooms, and that the overnight hours would be quiet, sometimes lonely. It was perfect, I thought, for someone who needed time to think or just be alone. The first few nights were uneventful. I would arrive just before midnight, the place mostly empty except for a few last-minute gym rats hustling on the cardio machines or lifting free weights. By 12:30 a.m., everyone was gone, and the gym fell silent except for the hum of air conditioning and the faint creaks of the building settling. I was given a mop bucket, cleaning rags, and a bottle of disinfectant spray, and I moved systematically from one section to another. The rows of ellipticals, treadmills, and weight machines gleamed under the fluorescent lights. The mirrors lining the walls reflected everything, creating an illusion of space, but also making me feel watched sometimes. About a week in, strange things began happening. On the third night, while wiping down the free weights near the back wall, I noticed the overhead lights flicker for a moment, then steady again. I paused and glanced around. There was no one else there, and the rest of the gym was quiet. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw a shadow move past the adjacent hallway. It was too quick to be a person, and when I looked toward the hallway, it was empty. Shrugging it off as fatigue, I continued cleaning. Later that night, while disinfecting the rowing machines, I heard the faintest sound of weights clanking together. The sound was distant but clear, like someone setting down dumbbells with more force than necessary. I stopped, looking for someone, but the gym was deserted. The clock on the wall read 2:15 a.m. I told myself the sound must have been echoes from earlier or a mechanical noise. But then I started noticing the cold patches. 1 minute I'd be standing in the middle of the gym, the temperature perfectly normal. The next, I'd feel a sharp chill, a breeze that seemed to come from nowhere. My breath would fog slightly in the air, despite the gym's climate control. The cold spots appeared unpredictably, near the weight racks, by the entrance to the locker rooms, even in the yoga studio. I tried to tell myself it was just drafty spots in the old building, but the chill felt different. It was almost like the temperature was dropping around me, focusing on me. On the fifth night, something happened that really shook me. I was in the men's locker room, mopping the tile floors near the shower stalls. The locker room was empty, save for the faint hum of the ventilation system. Suddenly, the shower water in one of the stalls turned on with no one around, the rushing water echoing loudly in the confined space. I dropped the mop and hurried out, my heart pounding. I called the front desk from the office phone to check if anyone was still in the locker room, but the receptionist confirmed the gym was closed and no members were inside. That night, when I told my supervisor, a middle-aged woman named Karen, she gave me a knowing look. "This place is weird at night," she said quietly. "A lot of employees have stories." I pressed her for details, but she only shook her head and said, "Just be careful." I wasn't the only one who noticed the strange things. Another cleaner told me about hearing music coming from the aerobics room at 3 a.m. when the gym was closed. No one was supposed to be there. One trainer swore he saw a figure in the reflection of the cardio room mirrors, an old man standing behind him, but when he turned around, no one was there. Curiosity overtook me, and I began researching the building's history. What I discovered chilled me. Before Vanguard Fitness occupied the space, it was a community center. Back in the early 1980s, it hosted basketball leagues, dance classes, and community events. But in 1983, a fire had broken out during a late-night aerobics class. The fire spread rapidly, trapping several people inside. 3 people died that night, 2 women and 1 man, caught in the blaze before the fire department could reach them. The community center was shut down and later demolished, but the foundation remained. When Vanguard Fitness moved in, the building was renovated but preserved parts of the old structure, including some walls and the gymnasium floor. After learning this, I understood why the air sometimes turned icy cold and why the sounds of weights or footsteps echoed through empty halls. One night, determined to see if I could experience anything directly, I stayed past my shift. At 3 a.m., when the gym was completely empty, I sat on a bench in the free weights area with a small digital recorder and my phone flashlight. For the first 10 minutes, nothing happened, just the low hum of the ventilation and my own breathing. Then I felt it. Pressure on my shoulders, like a hand resting lightly. I turned quickly. No one was there. I heard faint whispers, indistinguishable at first, but slowly words became clear. Help. Trapped. Don't leave. The lights flickered, and the mirrors in front of me shimmered, as if reflecting something beyond reality. I stood up and walked cautiously toward the basketball court area, which was now part of the gym floor. There was an old, faded outline of a court's markings beneath the mats. Suddenly, I heard a ball bouncing, rhythmic and slow. The sound echoed off the walls, but no ball was visible. I shone my flashlight around, heart racing. In the reflection of the far mirror, I caught a glimpse of 3 figures standing silently. 2 women and a man, dressed in workout clothes from the early 80s. Their faces were pale and their eyes hollow. One woman lifted a hand as if reaching out. I froze. The air grew colder, and the whispers turned into a low moan. I dropped the flashlight, which rolled across the floor, its light dancing on the walls. Panicked, I ran to the exit and didn't look back. The next day, I told Karen everything. She nodded grimly. "You saw them," she said softly. "The ones who never left." I quit the job soon after. The fear wasn't just about ghosts. It was the weight of unresolved tragedy, the feeling that the past was still trapped inside those walls, reaching out for release. Even now, whenever I pass by Vanguard Fitness, I hear the faint echoes of sneakers on a wooden court, the distant bounce of a basketball, and sometimes a whisper calling for help. Story the end. The first time I stepped into the Midtown Fitness Center, it felt like stepping into a relic of another time. The building was an old converted warehouse, high ceilings, exposed brick walls, and giant industrial windows that let in streams of pale afternoon light. Despite the modern gym equipment scattered throughout, the place had a strange atmosphere, a quiet hum beneath the usual sounds of treadmills and weights. I started going there about 6 months ago. I'd moved to the city for a new job, and Midtown Fitness was the closest gym near my apartment. The membership was cheap, the hours were generous, and for the most part, it was quiet during the evenings. Perfect for someone like me who hated crowds. At first, everything seemed normal. The staff were friendly, and the regulars mostly kept to themselves. But it didn't take long before the small oddities began to surface. It started with equipment. One night, after a long day at work, I was finishing up on the rowing machine. The gym was nearly empty, except for one other person on a stationary bike in the corner. As I pushed through my last few minutes, I noticed the TV screens above the machines flicker erratically, flashing static, before returning to the workout channels. I glanced around but didn't see any explanation. No one else seemed to notice. Later that week, as I was lifting weights near the back wall, the barbell shifted slightly on its own. I froze, eyes wide, convinced it had to be someone's prank, but the gym was empty. I called out, but there was no reply. I chalked it up to an uneven rack or a slippery surface and moved on, but the feeling lingered. One night, I stayed late, around 11 p.m., wrapping up my workout. The gym was almost deserted. Only a janitor named Mike remained, cleaning the locker rooms and floors. I was at the water fountain near the front when I noticed the lights flickering again. They dimmed, then brightened sharply, accompanied by a low buzzing sound. Suddenly, the loud clank of weights dropped, echoed through the empty gym. I spun around to see if anyone was nearby, but there was no one. Mike was in the locker room, which was on the opposite side of the building. My skin crawled. "Mike!" I called, but no answer. The buzzing stopped abruptly, and the lights returned to normal. The next day, I told a trainer about it, a woman named Sarah who'd been working there for years. She gave me a knowing look. "You're not the first to say stuff like that," she said quietly. "There's something off about this place." "What do you mean?" I asked. She hesitated, then whispered, "Years ago, before this was a gym, it was a warehouse. There was a fire here. Some workers died trapped inside. They say their spirits never left." I felt a chill, but tried to dismiss it. The locker rooms were the creepiest part of the gym. The tiles were cracked, the showers sometimes sputtered strange noises, and the smell was musty, like old damp concrete. I avoided showering there whenever possible. One evening, I went to the locker room to change after my workout. The air was colder than usual, and the fluorescent lights flickered. As I turned to open my locker, I caught movement in the mirror, a shadow passing behind me. I whipped around, but no one was there. The hallway was empty. I felt my heart racing. Over the next weeks, the incidents escalated. Machines would start on their own, TVs flickered with static images of old industrial machinery, and sometimes I heard whispers echoing faintly in the empty corners of the gym. One night, Sarah confided in me that she had seen a figure before, a man in old-fashioned work clothes, wandering near the weight racks. She said it felt like he was searching for something. Curiosity got the better of me, and one night, after closing, I stayed late to explore the gym. Mike had left, and I was alone. The silence was thick, broken only by the hum of the ventilation system. As I walked past the weight area, I felt the temperature drop suddenly. My breath became visible in the cold air. Ahead, near the large windows, I saw a faint outline of a man. He was tall, dressed in stained overalls, his face gaunt and expressionless. I froze. The figure turned slowly, his hollow eyes locking with mine. I could feel the sorrow radiating from him, a deep sadness that weighed heavily in the air. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but no words came out, only a cold gust that blew past me. I stumbled back, heart pounding, and the figure vanished. I ran out of the gym and didn't look back. The next day, I researched the history of the building. I found an old newspaper article describing a fire in the warehouse decades earlier where several workers had died. One of them was a young man named Henry, who was trapped when the fire broke out. I realized Henry's spirit was still lingering, restless. I stopped going to Midtown Fitness soon after. The place eventually closed down, but sometimes, walking past the old building, I swear I see a faint figure in the windows, a man searching, waiting for peace. Story the end. The fitness center was nothing extraordinary at first glance. It was one of those mid-sized gyms in the heart of a city suburb. Clean, functional, with enough machines to keep the regulars busy, but not so large as to be intimidating. I started going there a few months after moving to town. Working a stressful job meant I needed an outlet, and the gym became that outlet. I was there most evenings, usually from 7 to 9 p.m., long after the after-work rush had died down. The staff were friendly, the place was well lit, and the atmosphere seemed perfectly normal. Or so I thought. It started with subtle oddities. The first time I noticed something was when I was finishing my workout one night. The gym was almost empty, just a few people scattered around the machines. I was on the rowing machine near the back of the building when the lights flickered briefly. Nothing unusual in an old building, I told myself, but then I heard it. A faint but distinct sound of a door creaking open somewhere down a long hallway I hadn't paid much attention to before. I glanced over toward the hall, but the gym was eerily quiet. I figured maybe a staff member had left a door ajar and went to close it. I finished my workout and headed out, but as I passed that hallway, the door was closed tight. I brushed it off. A week or so later, I was on the treadmill late one night, the gym practically empty. I noticed that the gym's security cameras flickered on the small monitors at the reception desk. The feed from one camera near the back hallway briefly went black, then came back showing a shadow moving swiftly out of frame. The staff member at the desk seemed uninterested when I asked if they had any technical issues. I kept noticing odd things: weights misplaced, mats rolled out when no one was using them, faint cold spots in certain areas of the gym. I began feeling uneasy, but I'm not the type to jump to supernatural conclusions. Old buildings make noises, equipment gets moved. Simple explanations, right? Then came the nights when I was alone in the gym. I was there late one evening, around 11:30 p.m., finishing a routine on the free weights. The place was deserted except for me and the overnight cleaner. I packed up my bag and headed for the showers, located near the back corridor where I'd heard strange noises before. As I entered the hallway, the lights dimmed suddenly. The cleaner was nowhere to be seen, and the faint sound of something dragging across the floor echoed off the walls. My heart rate spiked. I walked faster. Just as I reached the shower doors, a cold rush of air brushed past me. I stopped and turned, but there was nothing. Then I heard it, a whispered voice, barely audible, coming from the empty showers. It said a name, my name, but with a strange, distorted tone that made my skin crawl. I didn't wait to investigate further. I grabbed my towel and left as fast as I could. The next day, I asked around about the building's history. The receptionist told me the gym had once been a part of an old hospital wing, which was converted decades ago. There were rumors about patients who had died in the building during the hospital's operation, some under tragic circumstances. Curiosity got the better of me, and I dug deeper. A local historian told me that back in the 1950s, the hospital's East Wing was used for patients with chronic illnesses, tuberculosis, and other conditions, with many dying there due to limited treatments. The building had been abandoned for years before being remodeled into the gym. The historian also mentioned that staff and patients had reported strange noises and apparitions in that wing long before it was converted. I started to see the strange occurrences in a new light. One night, determined to face my fears, I stayed at the gym after closing. Around midnight, the place was silent except for the hum of machines left on standby. I sat in the stretching area, eyes scanning the dim corridors. Suddenly, I heard footsteps pacing slowly near the weight room. They sounded heavy, deliberate. I called out, "Hello?" No answer. I stood and walked toward the source of the sound, but the hallway was empty. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw a figure, an outline of a man, translucent and shimmering faintly under the fluorescent lights. He wore old-fashioned clothes like something from the mid-20th century. His face was solemn, eyes sunken. For a moment, I felt a heavy sadness radiate from him. I blinked, and he was gone. I backed away, heart pounding, and rushed to the front desk where the security cameras were still live. I checked the monitors, but saw nothing out of the ordinary. I left the gym that night feeling shaken, but oddly compelled to learn more. In the days that followed, I spoke to the cleaning staff and other late-night employees. Many had their own experiences, cold spots that made them shiver, sounds of crying or whispering, lights flickering without cause. Some refused to work the late shift altogether. One evening, a fellow gym-goer named Lisa shared a story with me. She'd been here for months and had once encountered a similar figure near the locker rooms, an elderly woman who disappeared when she approached. Lisa said she sometimes felt watched by unseen eyes while working out. The more I heard, the more I felt a connection to the spirits who lingered in the gym. I decided to reach out to a local medium recommended by a friend. The medium visited the gym after hours. She walked slowly through the corridors, eyes closed, sensing the energy in the building. After some quiet moments, she said there was a strong presence, a group of spirits tied to the old hospital past. They were restless, caught between worlds, some confused and others deeply sorrowful. She performed a ritual to bring peace, lighting sage and placing protective crystals throughout the gym. She also suggested we create a small memorial corner in honor of those who had suffered and died in the building's former life. In the weeks following the ceremony, the strange events diminished, but never completely stopped. Occasionally, lights still flickered and shadows moved just out of sight, but the overwhelming sense of sadness lifted. I continued to go to the gym, finding comfort in the knowledge that I wasn't alone. The spirits, it seemed, were just waiting to be remembered, their stories buried beneath the surface of the fitness center. Sometimes late at night, when the gym is empty and silent, I catch a glimpse of a shadow watching quietly from the corner. It's a reminder that some places carry memories that never truly fade. Story, the end. The fitness center was one of those places that had been a fixture in the neighborhood for as long as anyone could remember. It wasn't fancy or new, a little worn around the edges with squeaky treadmills and dumbbells that had seen better days, but it was affordable, and the members were loyal. For most people, it was just a place to sweat and forget the outside world for a while. For me, it became something far more unsettling. I started working there part-time as a night janitor right after college. The day shift was hectic and noisy, but the nights were something else entirely. Quiet, still, and as I quickly learned, not quite empty. The first time I noticed something odd, I was mopping near the weight racks at around midnight. The gym was deserted except for the steady hum of the air conditioner. I was deep into the rhythm of work when I heard a faint clang, like a weight dropping to the floor. I paused, listening. Silence. No one else was there. I chalked it up to my imagination or the old building settling. But then it happened again the following night and again the night after that. It was always the same. The sudden noise of weights dropping, the low thud of something heavy hitting the floor. Curious, I started paying closer attention. I noticed the treadmills sometimes flicked on by themselves, slowly ramping up speed as if someone was running. The screens lit up, showing workout stats, but no one was on them. The locker room faucets would turn on and off without explanation, splashing cold water onto the tiled floor. Once, I was cleaning the showers when the water suddenly turned icy cold despite the heat being on. One night, after everyone had left, I stayed late to finish cleaning the aerobics room. The large mirror wall stretched across one side, reflecting the rows of empty steps and weights. As I worked, I caught a glimpse of movement behind me in the mirror, a shadow flickering quickly out of sight. I spun around. Nothing. Just the empty room. A cold chill ran down my spine, but I told myself it was just the draft from the open windows. The gym manager, Mr. Klein, was dismissive when I mentioned the strange noises. Old buildings have quirks, he said. Plumbing, wiring, you name it. But I wasn't so sure. I started talking to other staff, and the stories came out. The security guard, a tall, serious man named Dave, told me about the former lifeguard who drowned in the pool years ago. Apparently, he was on duty late one night when he slipped and hit his head on the pool edge. No one found him until morning. After that, people said strange things happened. Lights flickering near the pool, cold spots in the sauna, and mysterious splashes in the water. Some members refused to use the pool at night. One night, Dave invited me to stay with him during his shift. He wanted to show me the security footage of some of the incidents. We sat in the cramped security office, watching hours of mostly empty gym footage. Suddenly, on one of the cameras focused on the pool, a figure appeared. It was a man, faint and blurry, wearing old-fashioned swim trunks. He stood at the edge of the pool, looking down into the water. Then he vanished. Dave didn't say much, just nodded grimly. That's him. I started feeling uneasy every time I approached the pool area during my shifts. Sometimes I'd hear faint splashing or feel like I was being watched. One evening, as I was locking up the weight room, I noticed the treadmills again. One of them was running at full speed. I reached out to turn it off, but the console froze. Suddenly, the treadmill jolted, and I stepped back, startled. The lights flickered wildly, and the emergency exit alarms buzzed softly. I ran to the nearest light switch, flipping it off and on. The treadmill slowed and stopped. I decided I needed to understand what was happening. I talked to an old-timer who used to work at the gym years ago. She told me the story of the lifeguard's name, Jack, a quiet, kind man who loved the gym and took pride in his job. She said he was known to stay late, making sure everything was safe. One night, she said, Jack saved a child from drowning, but didn't make it himself. I felt a strange sadness hearing this. I started leaving little notes near the pool, messages like, "We see you, Jack," and "You're not alone." For a while, the strange events seemed to ease. But then, late one night, I was alone, wiping down machines in the cardio area. The room was silent except for the steady beep of the machines. I was tired, almost done for the night. Suddenly, the treadmill beside me started running. I looked up and saw the shadow again, this time clearer, a man jogging steadily, his feet pounding the belt. I froze, heart pounding, watching him move. The gym was cold, colder than before. I called out softly, "Jack." The figure slowed and stopped. Then he turned his head toward me. His face was sad, tired. I felt a wave of grief wash over me. Without thinking, I said, "We're sorry." The figure smiled faintly, then vanished. The next morning, I told Dave and Mr. Klein what I'd seen. Mr. Klein looked uneasy but said nothing. After that night, the disturbances mostly stopped. The pool water stayed still, the weights no longer clanged by themselves, the gym felt normal again. Years later, I heard the gym had been renovated, the pool filled in, and the building refurbished. But sometimes the night janitors and security guards still talk quietly about the man who loved the gym so much he never left. Whenever I think back to those nights, I remember the cold air, the flickering lights, the steady rhythm of footsteps on an empty treadmill. And I know that some places hold on to the past and the people who belong there long after the world has moved on. Story the end. The fitness center wasn't anything special, just a plain, nondescript building in the middle of a bustling city neighborhood. It had been there for years, a part of the community, but never quite popular or trendy. I started going there because it was cheap and close enough to my apartment that I could walk. The hours were convenient for me, mostly late evenings or very early mornings. That's when it was quietest. I liked the solitude. I could focus, clear my head, and grind through my workouts without distractions. At first, the gym felt like any other place. The usual mix of grunts, clinking weights, and the occasional thud of someone dropping a dumbbell. But it was the quiet after hours, the deep silence that settled over the place, that felt different. Strange, even. I noticed it the first time I stayed past closing, around midnight. The fluorescent lights hummed softly, and the building felt colder than usual, even though the thermostat said 70 degrees. That night, I was finishing up on the rowing machine near the back corner, the one facing the big wall of windows. Outside, the parking lot was empty except for a few cars. Inside, the gym was eerily still. The TV screens above the treadmills flickered with static, though none were turned on. The faint smell of rubber mats and sweat hung in the air. Then I heard it, a soft, rhythmic tapping like footsteps on the gym floor. I glanced over my shoulder. No one was there. The sound came again, closer this time, tapping steadily across the room. I stood up, heart pounding, and walked toward the main area. The weight machines sat untouched. The cardio equipment was empty. The sound stopped. I told myself it was just the building settling, old pipes or the HVAC system making noises. I tried to laugh it off, but unease clung to me like sweat. That was the first of many nights. Over the next few weeks, I started to notice other things. Sometimes the machines would switch on by themselves, the treadmill belts starting to move without anyone on them. Other times, the lockers would rattle, as if something heavy was slamming into them. I would hear faint whispers echoing from the locker rooms or the stretching area, too soft to make out words, but unmistakably voices. One night, I stayed late again, determined to see if I could catch whatever was causing these strange occurrences. I brought my phone to record, though I doubted I'd capture anything. Around 11:30 p.m., as I was doing dumbbell presses near the bench racks, the temperature suddenly dropped. My breath fogged in the cold air. The lights flickered violently, and the TV screens blinked on, showing static. Then I saw her. She appeared in the far corner, near the stretching mats, a woman in workout clothes, pale and translucent. Her hair was tied back, and her face was fixed in a grim expression. She was stretching silently, bending forward, touching her toes. I froze. My heart thudded so loudly I was sure she could hear it. I called out, "Hey, are you okay?" She turned slowly, eyes hollow but somehow pleading. Then she vanished like a wisp of smoke. The next day, I told the staff at the front desk about what I'd seen. The woman working, a middle-aged man named Greg, didn't seem surprised. "Yeah, a few people have mentioned seeing her," he said, nodding. "She was a personal trainer who died here a few years back. Heart attack, alone after hours. They found her in the stretching area." His voice dropped. "Some say she's still here, trying to finish her workout." I was skeptical, but the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. The gym was old and had seen its share of tragedies. I started digging online and found a news article about the trainer. Her name was Lisa. She was only 32 when she died, and she was well liked by everyone. The story said she'd collapsed during a late night session, alone, and no one found her until the next morning. After that, the stories about the gym seemed to line up. People saw her ghostly figure stretching or walking through walls. Machines sometimes operated without explanation. The weight room felt cold and heavy. I decided to keep going back, even though I was nervous. I wanted to understand. One night, around 1 a.m., I was the only person in the gym. The silence was overwhelming. I sat down on a bench near the stretching mats and spoke aloud. "Lisa, if you're here, what do you want?" The room grew colder, the hairs on my neck standing up. Then faint footsteps echoed from the far corner. I turned slowly and saw her again. Lisa, stretching. This time, she spoke, barely a whisper. "Help." I was too stunned to answer. The machines nearby started to rattle. The dumbbells clattered, the cable pulleys creaked. I asked, "What do you need help with?" She didn't respond, but I felt a pressure in the air, a heaviness pressing down. I realized she was trapped, stuck, reliving her final moments. Over the following weeks, I returned often. I talked to her, hoping to comfort her. I brought flowers once, leaving them by the stretching mats. Slowly, the cold spots faded. The strange noises lessened. One night when I arrived, the gym felt warmer. The lights were steady, the air lighter. I looked toward the stretching area, half expecting to see her, but she was gone. The gym remained open, but the strange activity stopped. Sometimes, late at night, when I'm near the windows by the mats, I swear I feel a presence watching me. Not angry, but peaceful. It's as if Lisa finally found rest. I still go to that gym sometimes, and when I do, I make sure to say hello to the woman who never finished her last workout. Story the end. It started as a simple decision to join the local fitness center after months of neglecting my health. The place was nothing fancy, an old building tucked between a laundromat and a strip mall coffee shop, but it had everything I needed. It was open 24 hours, which suited my unpredictable work schedule, and the membership fee was reasonable. I figured a little effort and late-night workouts would get me back in shape. From the beginning, the gym had an odd atmosphere. It was quiet during the late-night hours I usually came, the fluorescent lights casting a dull glow over the worn-out equipment. The machines creaked with age, and the faint smell of disinfectant mingled with lingering sweat was always present. Despite its shabby appearance, the gym was a sanctuary, a place to focus and push myself. I wasn't the only late-night regular. There was an older man named Frank who always showed up around midnight, lifting heavy weights with quiet determination. A woman, Jessica, usually came in after her night shifts at the hospital, and the staff was minimal, usually just one person behind the front desk, sometimes no one at all during the dead hours. After a few weeks of consistent workouts, things started to feel off. The first strange occurrence was minor. The lights flickered above the treadmills during my evening runs. At first, I blamed the old wiring or the building's outdated electrical system, but the flickering wasn't random. It seemed to pulse rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat. One night, while running on the treadmill near the back wall, the display suddenly went dark. The machine stopped without warning, throwing me forward slightly. I hit the emergency stop, my heart racing from the surprise. When I looked up, I caught a glimpse of a shadow at the far end of the gym near the weight racks. I blinked, and it was gone. I tried to shrug it off as tired eyes or my imagination, but the feeling of being watched grew stronger with each visit. Sometimes when I was lifting weights alone, I'd hear faint footsteps behind me. I'd turn quickly, but no one was there. Other times I heard soft whispers echoing between the machines, too quiet to understand but unmistakably real. One evening, I arrived late after a long shift at work. The gym was empty except for me. As I set up for bench presses in the corner, I noticed the temperature drop sharply. My breath fogged in the cold air and a chill ran down my spine. Suddenly, the weights on the barbell began to rattle, then clanged loudly as if someone had dropped them. I froze, gripping the bar tightly. The noise echoed through the empty room. I glanced over my shoulder, but no one was there. Later, I spoke with Lisa, the gym manager, about the incidents. She hesitated before telling me the building's history. Decades ago, the site was a factory where a worker died in a machinery accident. Since then, there have been rumors of unexplained noises and shadows seen by night staff. One regular, Tom, told me he'd been coming to the gym for years, even before it was remodeled. He said he sometimes saw a figure lurking near the free weights, only for it to vanish when approached. Tom believed it was the spirit of the worker, since the silhouette trapped and restless. Determined to see for myself, I stayed late one night after everyone left. Walking through the dimly lit gym, the silence pressed in around me. Then came the sound, metallic clanging from the weight room. I hurried toward it and found a barbell lying on the floor, plates still spinning slowly. The air grew cold, and I heard a whisper brush past my ear. I spun around, heart pounding. No one. The lights flickered violently, then went out, leaving me in near darkness. My phone's flashlight barely penetrated the gloom. I ran out, locking the door behind me. A week later, the gym announced it would close temporarily after a trainer collapsed during a late shift and died. Rumors said the equipment malfunctioned, but no one was certain. The place remains boarded up now, but sometimes when I walk past, I see flickering lights and hear faint clangs from inside. The fitness center isn't just a place for exercise, it's a reminder of something trapped, a restless presence lingering in the shadows between machines. Story the end. The first night I worked the graveyard shift at the fitness center, I thought it was going to be boring. Maybe a few lonely hours watching security footage, doing rounds to make sure everything was locked up tight. The gym was one of those 24-hour places, a sleek modern building with glass walls and neon signs, filled with treadmills, weight machines, and rows of lockers. The kind of place that was always buzzing during the day but completely deserted after midnight. I was hired as a security guard, mostly to keep an eye on things overnight since the place had been hit with petty theft and a few break-ins earlier in the year. I was told to patrol every hour, check the cameras, and report anything suspicious. The pay wasn't great, but it covered rent and food, and I had plenty of free time to myself. The building itself was nothing special except for the old part in the back. The management had remodeled most of the gym, but the locker rooms and a small office remained from the original structure, dating back to the late 70s. The old office area was mostly unused, with peeling wallpaper and dusty filing cabinets that looked like relics from a different era. I got to work around 10:30 p.m., clocked in, and started my rounds. The gym was silent, except for the hum of the machines left on standby, the distant dripping of water from a leaky faucet, and the occasional creak of the building settling. Nothing out of the ordinary. About an hour into my shift, I checked the surveillance monitors in the security room. There was nothing on the cameras but empty hallways and the darkened weight rooms. Then I noticed something odd. The camera covering the old office area was flickering, showing static, and then suddenly focusing on a dark figure standing near the filing cabinets. I froze for a second, leaning in. The figure was blurry, almost transparent. When I switched to the live feed, the office was empty. I told myself it was a glitch in the system. Later on, I walked toward that old office to see if I could find the source of the interference. The door was locked, but the management had left a key taped behind the security desk for emergencies. I grabbed it and unlocked the door. Inside, the room was cramped and dusty, the air stale and thick with the smell of mold and old paper. I shone my flashlight around, checking for anything unusual, but there was nothing. Just a desk, some scattered papers, and an old rotary phone that looked like it hadn't been used in decades. As I turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of something in the corner of my eye, a shadow moving swiftly across the wall. I whipped my head around, but there was nothing there. The hairs on my neck stood up. I shook my head, telling myself it was just my imagination. That night, as I continued my rounds, strange things kept happening. The radio on the security desk would crackle with faint voices, sometimes distant music, other times whispers so low I couldn't make out the words. The lights in the hallway flickered, and once the treadmill on the main floor started running by itself, the belt rolling slowly, then abruptly stopping. I tried to brush off the incidents, but an unease settled over me. Then, a week into my job, things took a turn for the worse. It was around 3 a.m. when the power in the entire gym suddenly went out. The emergency backup lights flickered on, casting eerie red glows throughout the rooms. I grabbed my flashlight and headed out to check the breaker box in the electrical room near the back of the gym. As I passed the locker rooms, I heard a faint thumping noise coming from the showers. I stopped and listened. There it was again, the sound of water slapping against tile, but the showers were empty. I called out, "Hello? Anyone here?" No answer. I felt a chill despite the warmth of the building. I hurried to the electrical room, and as I was fiddling with the breakers, my flashlight beam caught a figure standing in the doorway, barely visible, translucent, dressed in old workout clothes, soaked as if from a shower. I blinked, and it was gone. My heart hammered. I turned back to the breaker, flipping switches, and the power surged back on. Lights snapped on all over the gym. I ran back to the security room, breathing hard. Over the next several nights, the strange occurrences escalated. Doors slammed shut behind me, machines powered on and off by themselves, and I often heard footsteps echoing in empty hallways. Sometimes, in the locker rooms, I'd catch a glimpse of a pale woman in a soaked tracksuit, staring at me from the mirrors, vanishing when I turned around. I asked around the staff if anyone else had noticed anything weird, but most laughed it off as gym noises or my imagination. Curious and growing more disturbed, I decided to do some digging on my own. I discovered that decades ago, a woman named Diane Reynolds had worked at the gym. She was a passionate fitness instructor who tragically drowned in the gym's pool during a routine swim session after hours. The story went that she had slipped and hit her head, then submerged, but the official reports had never been conclusive. Some whispered that the pool area was unsafe and that management had tried to cover up the circumstances. As I read about Diane, the pieces started to fit. The showers where I heard the water running late at night were near the pool area. The figure I'd seen was likely her spirit, trapped by a sudden and violent death in the place she loved. One night, determined to confront whatever haunted the gym, I stayed late after my shift ended. Around midnight, I sat near the pool deck, the water still and glowing faintly under the emergency lights. The air was thick with moisture and the scent of chlorine. Suddenly, ripples appeared on the water's surface and the temperature dropped sharply. I saw a figure emerge, Diane's ghost, soaked and sad, looking around as if searching for something. I spoke aloud, "Diane, I know what happened. You're not forgotten. I want to help." She turned to me, eyes full of sorrow, and whispered, "The truth." I nodded. In the days that followed, I gathered evidence of the pool's dangerous conditions and the gym's negligence from old maintenance reports and employee testimonies. With the new information, the gym management was forced to acknowledge their mistakes and improve safety measures. After they held a memorial for Diane near the pool, the strange phenomena ceased. The gym felt peaceful again. I quit my job shortly after, but I never forgot Diane's spirit, how she lingered in the place she loved, waiting for justice and finally finding it. Sometimes when I pass the gym at night, I still catch the faint scent of chlorine and the distant echo of soft splashing water. Story the end. The first time I set foot in the fitness center, it felt like stepping into a different world. The building was older, nestled in a less busy part of town, a place where the air smelled faintly of rubber mats and sweat, but also something else, something faintly metallic, almost like rust or old paint. I had taken the cleaning job mainly because it was close to home and the hours suited my schedule. They needed someone to work the graveyard shift from 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. to keep the place spotless and ready for the early morning crowd. I figured it would be quiet, mostly empty, and a decent way to earn some extra cash without much hassle. The fitness center itself was a bit of a relic. It had been around for decades, passing through various owners, but never really modernized. The machines were old but functional, the treadmills creaked a bit, and the weight machines sometimes groaned when you lifted heavy. The lighting was mostly fluorescent, but with a flicker here and there that the management never seemed to fix. The walls were lined with mirrors, and the floors were rubber mats worn thin in places. You could tell it had seen better days, but the people who came there were loyal. On my first night, I arrived just after closing time. The staff had finished their shift and handed me the keys and cleaning supplies. I walked through the front door, the heavy metal locks clicking behind me. The place felt empty and silent, but not in a comforting way. It was the kind of silence that feels like the building is holding its breath, waiting for something. I started my rounds in the cardio area, wiping down the treadmill handles and elliptical machines. The air was thick with the lingering smell of sweat and rubber. Occasionally, I'd catch a glimpse of my reflection in the mirrors, sometimes 2 or 3 reflections overlapping because of the angles, and it made me uneasy. It was easy to feel like you were being watched, even though I was alone. About an hour into my shift, I heard a soft thud from the weight room. At first, I thought it was just a machine settling or something falling over, but then I heard it again, like a dumbbell hitting the floor. I grabbed my flashlight and slowly made my way toward the source. The weight room was empty, the racks still orderly. I checked under the benches and behind the machines, but there was nothing out of place. I shrugged it off and continued cleaning. Over the next few nights, these little incidents piled up. Sometimes the locker room showers would turn on by themselves, spraying water onto the tile floors. At other times, I'd hear faint footsteps echoing through the empty halls, but when I checked the security cameras, no one was there. The lights flickered more frequently, especially in the hallways near the aerobics studio. One night, as I was cleaning near the studio, the sound of faint music drifted through the air, something like an old aerobics track from the 80s, upbeat and distorted. I knew the studio was empty. The classes were long over. I paused and listened, but the music stopped as soon as I looked inside. Curious and a bit unsettled, I started asking the regular staff if the building had any history. That's when I learned about the fire. Years ago, before the fitness center opened, the building was a community recreation center. It hosted dance classes, aerobics, and basketball leagues. One night during a popular late-night aerobics session, a fire broke out. It spread quickly, fueled by old curtains and wooden floors. Several people were trapped inside. The fire department managed to save most, but tragically, 2 women and a man lost their lives. The building was left closed for years until a new owner renovated it and reopened it as a fitness center. But the core of the old building, the gym floor, the studio, remained intact. One particularly cold night, about 3 weeks after I started, I was cleaning the locker rooms when the temperature suddenly dropped. My breath fogged in the air, and I felt a chill creep down my spine. The shower faucets sputtered on and off by themselves, and I heard a soft whisper, "Help me." I spun around, flashlight shaking in my hand, but no one was there. I ran out and locked the door behind me. After that night, the incidents grew more intense. The machines sometimes switched on or off by themselves. On a few occasions, I saw shadows flicker in the mirrors, moving independently of me. I heard sobbing and faint voices calling out, pleading for help. I even felt an icy hand brush past my arm once while I was cleaning the weight racks. One night, unable to sleep, I decided to stay past my shift and try to capture something, anything, on my phone. I sat in the aerobics studio with the lights off, recording audio and video. Around 2:30 a.m., I felt a sudden drop in temperature. The air grew heavy and thick. My phone's camera caught a faint glow near the far wall. Then I saw it. A translucent figure, a woman in 1980s workout clothes, moving slowly as if searching for something. Her face was pale, eyes empty and desperate. She reached toward me silently. Frozen, I watched as she vanished into thin air. The recording captured her whispered words, "Help me. Trapped." Terrified, I left the gym and didn't come back for days. Eventually, I quit. The weight of the place's past, the restless spirits tethered to the building, was too much. Sometimes, I drive past the fitness center late at night. The lights flicker, and I swear I hear faint music from the aerobics studio, the echo of footsteps, and the soft voice calling out for help. Story. The end. It was late October when I first started working the night shift as a maintenance technician at Vanguard Fitness, a moderately sized gym nestled in the outskirts of the city. The place was popular, but the building itself was old, originally constructed in the 1920s as a factory before being converted into a fitness center in the late 1980s. I was brought in to handle overnight cleaning and minor repairs, a job that suited me since I was between contracts and liked the quiet hours. The first few nights were uneventful. I would arrive at around 10 p.m., do a quick walkthrough to check for any obvious damage, then get to work cleaning the locker rooms, vacuuming the weight areas, and inspecting the equipment. The gym closed at 11 p.m., and by midnight, I was usually the only person left inside. One particular night, something felt off from the moment I stepped through the entrance. The air was unusually cold, and there was a faint metallic smell that reminded me of old machinery oil. I shrugged it off, assuming it was related to the building's industrial past. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering intermittently as I made my way to the treadmill area. About an hour into my shift, while dusting near the row of elliptical machines, I heard the faint clanking sound of weights dropping. I froze, listening carefully. The gym was supposed to be empty, except for me. The sound came again, this time from the free weights corner. I cautiously moved toward the source, flashlight in hand, but there was nothing. The weights were all neatly racked. I told myself it was just the building settling or some loose equipment rattling. Still, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. The next night, I arrived a little earlier to do some minor electrical work. While changing a light bulb near the stairwell, I caught sight of a shadow darting across the upper hallway. I called out, but got no answer. The stairwell was empty. It wasn't until a week later that I learned about the building's dark history. During a break, I chatted with the morning receptionist, Lisa, who mentioned that years ago, before the gym was there, the building was a warehouse. A fire had broken out on the second floor, trapping and killing a worker named Jack Davis. He was a young man in his 20s, known for being kind, but troubled. Lisa told me staff and members sometimes spoke of strange occurrences, lights flickering, cold spots, and the sound of footsteps when no one was around. Some even reported seeing a shadowy figure watching them from the corners. Curious, I began paying closer attention during my shifts. One night, as I was inspecting the weight room, the temperature suddenly dropped several degrees. My breath fogged in front of me. The lights flickered wildly, and I heard a faint whisper, almost like a sigh, echoing off the walls. I turned sharply, shining my flashlight into the shadows, but nothing was there. Later that week, while cleaning the locker room, the shower taps started running on their own, splashing cold water onto the floor. I rushed to turn them off, but the faucets resisted, as if held by an invisible hand. My heart hammered as the water finally stopped. That same night, I was heading toward the front exit when I caught movement in the large mirror along the hallway. A figure stood behind me, a young man wearing old-fashioned clothes, eyes sorrowful and distant. I spun around but found only the empty corridor. Shaken, I left the gym and didn't return for 2 days. When I came back, I spoke to Lisa again. She confided that the gym's management knew about the hauntings, but chose to ignore them, fearing bad publicity. One night, I decided to confront whatever was there. Around midnight, I sat in the main workout area with the lights dimmed, talking aloud, asking if anyone was present. Suddenly, a row of dumbbells rolled off the rack, clattering to the floor. I felt a cold breeze brush past me, carrying with it a faint scent of smoke and burnt wood. "Jack?" I whispered. The lights flickered again, and from the darkness, I heard a low, mournful groan. I nodded slowly. "I'm here. I want to help." From then on, the incidents lessened. The cold spots were fewer, and the noises quieted. I learned that Jack's spirit was restless, trapped by the trauma of his death. After a few months, Vanguard Fitness closed for renovations and never reopened. The building was sold and turned into loft apartments. But sometimes when I pass by the old structure, I swear I see a figure in the window, watching, waiting. And on quiet nights, I still hear the faint clink of weights and the whisper of footsteps echoing through the empty halls. Story, the end. The fitness center was nothing extraordinary when I first joined, just your typical mid-sized gym nestled between a strip mall and a small office park. It was located in an old brick building that had once housed a textile factory back in the early 1900s. That piece of history didn't bother me. I just cared about having a place to work out after long hours at my desk job. At first, everything seemed perfectly normal. The staff were friendly, the machines were in decent shape, and the late evening crowd was manageable. I preferred the 10 p.m. to midnight shift, when most people had gone home, leaving the place quieter and more serene. It was my way of winding down, clearing my head. But after a few weeks, subtle things started happening. Nothing I could immediately explain or even take seriously, but enough to make me uneasy. It began on a Tuesday night when I was doing laps on the elliptical near the back corner of the gym. The overhead lights flickered briefly, but that was nothing unusual for a building of that age. However, moments after the flicker, the speakers crackled and a faint voice whispered through the system. I stopped mid-stride, ears straining to catch what it said. It was almost indecipherable, but the tone was unmistakably urgent. I glanced around. Nobody else was near me, and the front desk was empty. The cleaning crew must have left early. The gym was eerily silent except for the hum of the machines and my own breath. I shrugged it off as a technical glitch or some radio interference. A few days later, while doing my usual weight routine, I noticed the dumbbells on the rack had been rearranged. I was certain I'd left them organized by weight the night before, but now they were scattered and mismatched. I thought maybe a forgetful member had moved them and not put them back correctly. Later that week, during one of my late-night runs on the treadmill, I caught a glimpse of a figure out of the corner of my eye. I turned sharply, expecting to see another gym goer or a staff member, but the hallway was empty, just the echo of my footsteps bouncing off the concrete walls. The hair on the back of my neck stood up, but I told myself I was just tired and imagining things. The locker rooms were another source of discomfort. One night, after finishing my workout, I went to the showers. The air was thick with humidity, the sound of running water echoing off the tiled walls. I was alone, or so I thought. Suddenly, I heard the faint sound of a woman humming a lullaby somewhere nearby. It was soft, almost hypnotic. I stopped and listened, but the sound vanished as quickly as it had appeared. I stepped out of the shower area, wrapped in my towel, and asked the nearby attendant if anyone else was around. He shook his head. The gym was practically empty. The more these incidents happened, the more I started digging into the gym's history. I wanted answers. A few calls and some online research revealed that the building was indeed once a textile factory, but there was more to the story. In the early 1950s, the factory had been the site of a tragic fire. Several workers were trapped inside overnight, and many lost their lives. The fire had been devastating, with the older parts of the building reduced to ashes. The gym now occupied a renovated section that had been spared the worst damage, but the memories, it seemed, lingered. I found local news clippings that described the tragedy in detail, how firefighters struggled to reach the trapped employees, the cries for help that echoed through the night, and the somber funerals that followed. It was impossible not to feel a chill reading about it. One evening, determined to confront whatever was there, I stayed at the gym long after closing. The staff had left, the doors locked behind me. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead as I made my way to the farthest corners of the building, the areas closest to where the fire had happened. As I moved through the deserted weight room, I felt the temperature drop suddenly. My breath fogged in front of me, and I noticed my skin prickling with goosebumps. The machines were silent, but I heard the faint creaking of metal as if someone was shifting weights somewhere in the shadows. I called out, "Is anyone here?" Only silence answered. Then, from the corner of my eye, a shadow flickered, a pale, indistinct shape moving between the rows of treadmills. I froze, heart pounding. I told myself to stay calm, that it was just a trick of the light. Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me, slow, deliberate steps. I turned sharply, but no one was there. I hurried toward the front desk and noticed the computer screen flickering with static. The security cameras were cycling through their feeds, but one monitor showed a dark figure standing near the lockers. I rubbed my eyes, but when I looked again, the figure was gone. The next morning, I recounted my experience to the night janitor, a grizzled man named Frank who'd worked in the building for over 20 years. He nodded, knowingly. "You're not the first to see things here," he said quietly. "The fire left scars. People say the workers never really left this place." He told me stories of strange noises in the dead of night, the smell of smoke when no fire was burning and machines turning on by themselves. Staff would sometimes feel a presence behind them or see fleeting glimpses of figures out of the corner of their eyes. As the weeks passed, my encounters grew more intense. One night, while stretching near the back hallway, I felt a cold hand brush against my arm. I spun around, but the corridor was empty. The hairs on my neck stood up as I hurried back to the main floor. On another occasion, I was on the rowing machine when the gym's lights dimmed to near darkness. The emergency exit signs glowed eerily red, and I could hear whispering, indistinct voices overlapping in a low chant. I looked around frantically but saw no one. The sounds stopped abruptly and the lights returned to normal. Despite the fear, I felt a strange pull to the place, as if the spirits wanted to be acknowledged. Eventually, I contacted a local paranormal investigator, hoping to understand what was happening. She brought her equipment, a mixture of EMF detectors, digital recorders, and infrared cameras, and spent a night in the gym with me. During the investigation, we caught cold spots and inexplicable drops in temperature in the old factory wing. On playback of our audio recordings, faint voices and cries could be heard, sometimes calling out names or pleading for help. One moment was particularly chilling. As we walked past the locker room, her EMF meter spiked wildly. The recorder picked up a whisper, "Help us." We were both silent for a moment, feeling the weight of those words. The investigator explained that the spirits were likely tied to the trauma of the fire, unable to move on due to the suddenness of their deaths and the pain they endured. She recommended a cleansing ritual, which involved smudging with sage, prayers, and setting up a memorial space to honor those lost. We arranged for a small ceremony involving staff and local historians. Candles were lit, names of the victims read aloud, and the gym's management agreed to place a plaque commemorating the workers who died there. After the ritual, the atmosphere shifted noticeably. The heavy sadness lifted, and the strange occurrences reduced significantly. Machines stopped turning on by themselves, and the whispered voices faded. Still, on rare occasions when I'm alone in the gym late at night, I feel a gentle presence nearby, a quiet reassurance like a lingering spirit saying thank you. I don't fear the gym anymore. Instead, I respect it, knowing that beneath the sweat and effort lies a history of lives and memories, some still reaching out from the past. Story the end.